Welcome back, dear friends, to Highlights of the Book of Action and Reaction. This week we will be giving our highlights from chapter 14. It is entitled Interrupted Redemption. Leo, yet again, it's a beautiful chapter. We learned so much. Our hearts are profoundly touched, and we could say with wholeheartedly, we cried, we rejoiced with the mentors when we read this.
And we read again.
And we read again. And we encourage you to read the entire book, not just this chapter. Leo, they start out with yet again another case, and it's the case of Edicei and his wife Marcella and their three beautiful children. And we see that this case is not like any other case in family. It is a bunch of souls who knew each other in previous incarnations and come again to recapitulate previous problems. And we see that our unconscious memories in this story, how they have their role in our relationships, in our families with one another. And we're going to see that the father has had previous things, we will say, with the two daughters, and an aversion for the son since previous life, that until today he still continues to have an aversion for his son. What is most interesting in this particular case is the wife. And we wanted to start out with that highlight today because it is beautiful and it is touching. And we would say that is sort of like the starlet in this chapter, because she is what really pulls at our heartstrings, because we see that she's suffering the most. But likewise, we see that Silas, he metaphorically says that she basically has been educated in the school of duty. And it's beautiful because he says it in a metaphoric and a poetic way, because if we can read in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 17, probably specifically number 7, but read the whole chapter. But they touch on this idea of duty, but not just any old duty like the duty we have when we have a duty to go to work, an obligation to my children, but a moral duty.
The moral duty.
And she, we could say, respectfully,
exemplifies.
She's the embodiment of duty, because we see throughout this chapter she is confronted with trials and tribulations, and she continues to push forward ahead with her obligations.
It is very beautiful, because here we see, as you were mentioning, the problems of the past coming back again with another chance to come as a family, as a family in the family gathering, to resolve the issues of the past. So we see again God, work in our lives, giving us the opportunity to become better individuals, become better spirits. And when this idea of duty, as they said here, they have to have what? We have to have what? Discipline. We have to be disciplined individuals. And that's something that the husband, didn't like it. He was looking for something a little bit more easygoing, which was a person who he had outside, trying to escape from his commitments, his marriage. And it's funny because, not funny, but very interesting. that Andre Luiz brings us part that this explanation that Marcella represented the embodiment of the discipline that he himself ought to observe, and the duties he should honor, whereas Mara, which was the mistress with her fairy eyes, promised him freedom and pleasure. So, the mundane things of life that sometimes we, use as an excuse, say, oh, no, I like this, I like that, or I wish I had this life, and we fall again on the same mistakes that perhaps in the past we were doing, and we hurt others. But we see in her life, in the way she treated the whole situation, even the letters that she was receiving, she would burn them
from
just
the
to hide them.
She was receiving letters from the mistress.
Exactly. So it's a beautiful thing as to be dutiful, even, again, towards her, not only her life, but the other ones who was living with her, the two daughters and the son. And
it's interesting because the very thing, the betrayal that her husband basically does again in this life, he had done it to her before, because in a previous incarnation, They were together, entwined, and he had actually left her in a previous life also to be with another woman. And he had, just because we want people to go and read the chapter, and you should, we'll tell you just small bits and pieces, but the husband in a previous life had also had other mistresses, whom today, 2 of which are his 2 daughters. And that's why in the story we see he's more drawn to them. But his first child, which is his son, which is interesting, we want you to go and read the chapter to see how amazing, and we can reflect, because there are true cases in and outside our Spiritist centers where we see people say, oh, I know that I'm supposed to love my child, but I have this feeling inside of me that I don't, this aversion. Likewise, it could be opposite. We could have this deep connection with our child, which we don't even know where it comes from.
And speaking with child, tell us what happens with his thoughts when he's thinking about his plot.
Oh, this is the best, probably major highlight. So in the story, Lidil, who's the husband, he reaches a point where he's so intertwined with his mistress, Mara. He reached the point where he's disgusted with his family. He has a complete aversion for his wife, and he's already concocting ideas as to how he's going to leave her. But since he has such a strong attraction and love for his 2 daughters, he can't imagine living without them. So he begins to think to himself, how can I get out of this while still at least having the opportunity of having my 2 daughters? So he begins to think to himself how he's going to murder his wife. And Silas, in this book, Andre Luiz, they bring to us this idea that if we only knew how our thought forms manifest around our mental field and actually can be read by other spirits, by other minds. And sometimes even there are certain psychics who aren't exactly mediums, but they're able to read the thought forms that are manifested like a book. And so Silas actually brings us, he said, if people only knew, if they only knew, they wouldn't be so free with what kind of thoughts they have. But what's interesting is the intercession that goes on, Leah, was what you were trying to refer to, is that they saw that very night, the husband was planning to kill the wife and make it look like a suicide. And in a quick thinking by Silas and the higher minds, he awakens, or rather I should say, he conduces one of the young daughters to come out of her physical body, to come near her father and to read his thought forms. And she sees that her father's going to commit murder. Immediately, she's drawn quickly back to her physical body, and she starts yelling, "Daddy, Daddy, don't kill!" And so she screams so loud, and even as we're telling you this, we get goosebumps all over her body. Everybody in the house wakes up, and Marcella, the wife, thinks that he's about to kill himself, and says in this heartfelt plea to him, like basically, please, Lidel, don't do this. If you have to go and be happy with your mistress, go and be happy with your mistress. And then in that moment, she realizes, well, what I'm going to do with 3 children on my own. And it's beautiful, Leo, what happens next when the higher spirituality comes and helps her.
Certainly gives her again the help, as we have been seeing Silas and Andre Luiz and Eladi working with her and telling her, just go on with your life, persist, and do not inflict on his free will again.
Yes.
Which again, we see another calling to all of us here, that as we are dutiful, as we try to change ourselves to better ourselves, we can't go on saying, okay, you have to do it, this person have to do it, my spouse, my kids, whoever lives with us or work with us in this reincarnation, they have to do similar things. Now, we have to respect the same way God respects our free will. But she receives this charge of energy to go on with her life and to give him time to reflect about what he's doing.
With Silas and the good spirits, what they say to her is beautiful, because they basically give her instructions, because they know that eventually he will be in this repentant state. They say, you know, like you said, give him that free will. You don't have the right to impose, but, you know, also be kind to him. You know, be charitable. It's amazing, because this idea does not really exist much in such detail outside of the Spiritist knowledge. Although we learn, even in the Christian ideas, that we should forgive one another, but how to put that down to an exact science is difficult. That I should be understanding towards those who, you know, have hurt or transgress the law of God. Because oftentimes...
Benevolence.
Or benevolence, right? Oftentimes we think when we get hurt, the person's really hurting us, in actuality, they're transgressing a law of God, right, Leo?
That is correct. It's certainly, I mean, we think that, it's a person that has to forgive me, and I will be okay. No, we will have to come back and make amends, not only to that person, obviously, if we have that opportunity, but also as well the natural laws. And that's one of the points as well that we can touch basically here on the book, is that perhaps, if they do the right things that they're supposed to do, the wife and the kids, but the husband, as he's committing the same errors of the past, what if he doesn't realize in this lifetime and they ascend to a higher realm? Who are they going to pay? Who is he going to pay to? He's going to pay to someone in similar situations. Again, try to correct the errors of the past, and they will go on with their lives. And again, the beauty, not only for the family who is going to be ascending to a higher state of mind, but also he also will be illuminated. He will come to to the realization of living a better life, living a more fulfilling life.
Leo, one of the other things we wanted to touch on, it's interesting, Andre Luiz asked Silas, well, why don't you just encourage her to work things out with the husband? But basically he says you can't impose. And they mentioned, when I believe it's in Matthew, when they talk about divorce and olden times, and even the gospel, they touch on this idea of divorce, because they say that once you reach a point where you're almost going to hurt somebody else, in this case, which is true, because Liddell had reached a point where he's going to murder his wife, it is best to separate so as not to cause more harm. But I think one of the major highlights we would say is that if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like it's really difficult, it's hard, this idea of duty really comes to mind, like Marcella, being resignated and obedient to understand that the situation she's now in, somehow unconsciously she has some remembrance, right? Of what she's done. And
I think since we always have to bring this text, the teachings of this book, of any book that we read, especially when it's something good, to our daily lives. And if you find yourself in a situation like this, what would you do? Pray. Ask our dear Creator for some enlightenment. Connect with our mentors. We often talk about the mentors, but we don't even give ourselves the time to connect with them. And we think that something's going to show in front of us. But really connect. Have that moment of prayer, and they will send us enlightenment. Because there are many women, many marriages who are in despair right now because one of the two sides, they're not cooperating as they're supposed to be, or sometimes the sick child is not helping the marriage as well. So there are many cases that, again, as we see, we give emphasis on this book a whole lot on the prayer, on the necessity of connecting with our dear Creator.
Because what happens when we pray? God gives us spiritual CPR, courage, patience, and resignation. Right, Leo?
CPR. That is definitely a way for us to close this as well, that connect with our dear Creator. When we're trying to be dutiful, let us be disciplined. Start with the physical environment.
Exactly.
When we try to be dutiful, when we're trying to do something, change the physical environment, change the way we behave, physically speaking. Wake up on time, do things on time, put time for everything. Well, if I enjoy doing something fun, well, have enough time, a lot of time for fun as well, that when the time ends, that's it. Have the discipline, and with that, you will discipline your thoughts, your feelings as well, and you will also encourage others to do the same thing. So we hope that we can encourage you this way, encouraging you again to read and really dive into these teachings as well. That is so helpful to all of us, and we'll see you next time.
Many blessings.